neat. So now we're going to talk about the old clubs. Check this out. This is a driver from about I think this was around 1988, 89. Has the 1 on the bottom, so it was the 1 wood because it's made of wood. And now look at this big old stretch of black right here. Hear that sound? This is a thin kind of plastic string that's called whipping. So they put this on here so it makes the shaft run into the head in a nice smooth manner. So that's a little different. There's an insert right here. This is a plastic insert that is screwed into the head with screws. So if you hit it right here in the middle and you really caught one super good way back in the day, they called it hitting it in the screws. So if you hit it right there in the center of the club face, you really got the best distance out of it. So you always want to hit it in the middle, but this is it's a beautiful club. It's never been hit. So this thing's been around for a long time, never been hit, and it never will be. So when we compare that to today's driver, can you see the difference in these things? Let me give a better view. It's actually even cooler when you look at it like this. Look at the size difference in these things. I mean, today's driver is enormous. Matter of fact, the 3 woods of today are bigger than the driver right now. So can you imagine how good you had to be to hit the center of this club face time after time after time? It had to be pretty good. So that's, if you go back to, there was called the Big Three. So there's a little bit of history. Does anybody, you can unmute yourself if you know the answer. Who has the most major championship wins in PGA Tour history? You can just unmute yourself. You don't have to be called on.
Isn't that Jim Furyk?
Nope, he's had the lowest score ever. But the most, and Jim's only won 1 major championship, and that was the U.S. Open.
Then that had to be Tiger Woods.
Tiger Woods is second on the list.
Jack Nicklaus.
Jack Nicklaus. Okay, so Jack Nicklaus has 18 major championships, had the most ever in the history of the game. And he has 18 of them. Think about this. He finished second 22 times in major championships. Wow. He was either first or second in like 40 majors. That's pretty awesome. He was really good. And in his day, he was part of what they called the Big Three. You had Jack Nicklaus, you had Arnold Palmer, and you had Gary Player. Those guys were amazing. And there was about a 5 to 7 year stretch that one of those 3 guys won the Masters every year. So you can actually go back and look that up and look at how amazing of a feat that was. But these are 3 of the names I want you to be able to look up: Gary Player, Jack Nicklaus, and Arnold Palmer. Arnold Palmer's called the King. He's awesome. All the fans loved Arnie. Just a great, great, great guy. And there's a lot of great articles and stuff on him. And then before those guys, there were 3 other major champions that were out there. That was kind of the Big Three before Palmer, Nicklaus, and Player. And that was Sam Snead. Sam Snead has the most PGA Tour wins in history. Then there was Byron Nelson. Byron Nelson was a true gentleman in the game of golf. And Byron Nelson won 11 straight PGA Tour tournaments in a row. 11 straight tournaments. You got to be pretty daggone good to win 11 straight tournaments. And I tell you what, today, if you won 11 straight PGA Tour events, you know how much money you would win? The average tour player, if you win a tournament, he wins about $1.2 million. Holy cow. So if he won 11 straight, whew, like $20 million or so. And not only did he win 11 straight that year, he won 19 tournaments that year. That's pretty impressive. Next up is the wee Iceman, the Hawk, none other than Ben Hogan. Ben Hogan, who also grew up in the same town as Byron Nelson. They grew up playing against each other. They were both caddies at Fort Worth Country Club. So little history there. It's something worth going back and looking at. But Ben Hogan was a really good player, very focused. He didn't talk much. He always laser focused with his eyes. He was always zoned in. That's why they called him the Hawk. Didn't talk very much to people. But Ben Hogan, the story about Ben Hogan was he was driving back to Texas with his wife. big old giant steering wheel, these big old cars from way back in the 50s. And he's driving down this road. They're coming towards a bridge. Well, across this bridge comes a bus going in the other direction. Well, the bus driver kind of fell asleep and started drifting into Ben Hogan's lane. And Ben saw this, and he threw himself across the car over top of his wife to save his wife. Well, when he did that, the steering wheel actually went through the seat where he was just sitting. So if he hadn't thrown himself over his wife, not good. But he was really bad hurt. His legs were mangled, really bad. And when Ben was in the hospital, the doctor said, Mr. Hogan, you're never going to walk again. And Ben Hogan, showing perseverance, which is our core value this week, he basically said, I don't care what you say. You don't control me. You don't control my mind. You don't control my body. So he set out to start walking again, not only walking again, but playing golf, and playing golf on a championship level. And I think this was around 1951 when this happened. So in 1953, he went out and won the Masters. He won the U.S. Open. Then he got on a boat, went across to Europe. He only played in one British Open in his lifetime, and he won that one. So he won the first 3 legs of the Grand Slam on legs that were kind of beat up, and the doctor said he would never walk again. So don't ever let anybody tell you that you can't do something. If you've got the heart of a champion and you've got the desire and drive to reach your goal, nobody can stand in your way. And I think that's a great story about perseverance and somebody who uses his mind to overcome anything. So that kind of goes into play with what we've talked about today. That's super, super, super important. And go back and look at the history of these guys. I think it's always important. And for you girls out there, I'm going to talk about Babe Zaharis. Look her up. She was awesome. She was a phenomenal athlete, and she's actually the first woman to ever play against the guys on tour. She played in a PGA Tour event long before a lady by the name of Annika Sorenstam did it. But she went out, and she was a world-class athlete in many sports. That's why we always say play as many sports as you possibly can so you can become a better athlete. But she was really good in so many sports, but she was awesome, awesome, awesome at golf. She could hit it a ton way back in the day. So, ladies, check out her as well. She was phenomenal. But so the girls, look up everybody. Guys, you should look up the girls too. See what they did and how good they were. Nikki Wright was another great golfer. She just passed away last year, or actually back in, I want to say February. She won like 80-something times on the women's tour, so she was really good too. But I always like looking up the old guys that came way back before. They were the trailblazers. They set the standards of what we have today. So it's really important to know your history. I feel like we should always go back and look at the history of things, not only of the country, but of the sport that we love so much, like golf. So perseverance, use your minds, and go from there. We don't have trivia today, so I'm going to have to let you guys in on a secret. You guys finished second last week in the naming of the superheroes, supervillains that are named after bugs. The birdie class, who's going to be on here in another hour, they were the winners. They ended up with 10. And I think you guys had like 7 or 8. So good job. Finished second, but you beat the Eagles, which are the oldest kids we have on the Zoom calls. You beat them. They only had like 4. So great job there. Pretty wild, huh? If I keep pulling on this thing, this whole thing would unravel and I would make a serious mess. I'm going to get yelled at by some of the people that work here, but that's okay. I'm going to destroy this golf ball, make a mess back here. Oh, man, I'm going to try to pull out a big string here. See, you can look at these. This is truly rubber bands in here. Rubber bands. You see all them things in there? That's pretty wild. Cool. Well,
I think Alexis has a question.
Why did they just use like solid rubber? Like.
So today's golf balls, if you had the machinery to cut open a golf ball today, like a Pro V1 would be a solid core. There's probably like 3 or 4 layers inside there. And what's going to happen is you don't have rubber bands. So the rubber bands don't kind of go away. They don't lose their elasticity or anything like that. So the core of these, the newer golf balls are so much better, and they're meant to handle the higher speeds that the golfers swing it, the clubs. The golf balls are designed to match up with the club heads today. They kind of go hand in hand with, you see the giant club head that I showed you earlier. Well, that ball is meant to hit the ball really high with not a lot of spin. The wooden club I showed you would actually, the ball would come out real low and it'd go out about 150 yards, and then it would climb up really high. Oh, here. Oh, it's slowly coming out. It's like an alien. And look at that. Look at that. It's pretty wild looking. There's a cover that it was just sitting in. These things sound like they're alive. And they start unraveling. So you start pulling on a string. Whoa! So you can unravel this whole thing. I'm going to make a serious mess today, and Miss Taylor's going to be mad at me. That's okay. I don't mind. So anyway, anybody got any questions today? Any questions? Anybody?
Alexis, you have one?
Alexis?
The ball of rubber bands, it looks like a ball of like lo mein or something. I'm yeah.
Sure does.
Although it doesn't look very like slimy and wet though.
No, it's just, it is just like grabbing, it's a rubber band. That's all it is. And they wound this thing.
Does it literally feel like a rubber band?
Yes, absolutely. It is. That's all it is. It's a giant rubber band. So what they did is they had this giant like spool of these bands like this, and they had a machine that would just spin the golf ball, and this thing would wrap all the way around that center core. And then once it got to a certain diameter, they slapped the cover on it, and then they used to have what they call a compression. It's how tightly this was wound, and it was just they had 100 compression or 90 compression. So it's kind of interesting to see how these things were really put together. But that's pretty wild, huh? I think it's neat. Super neat. Messy, but neat. Any other questions?
What does
Go ahead,
the
Alexis.
ball look like?
What?
What does the core of that ball look like? Like inside of like all the rubber bands?
It's like a little blue ball. Tell you what, after the next class, I'll probably be down to the middle of this ball because it'll start unraveling itself. And next week when you come on, I'll show you the ball in the middle. Okay?
How does it smell in there, Coach B?
I don't know. I can't smell.
We walked in there earlier and it smelled like burnt rubber. It does not smell good, so I can only imagine.
I used a tool to cut a big cut in this, and then I could start prying it open. And then I realized that probably smells like burnt rubber. I don't know. I can't smell. So all of you who ever think of playing football, one of the negatives of that is I played football as a kid, and in 4th grade, I had a lot of concussions. My head getting slammed against the ground a lot, and I lost my sense of smell. So I can't smell a thing. So they're all in there going, oh, it stinks in here. And I'm like, I couldn't tell you. Nah.
All right. Well, thanks.
All right,
Anybody have any more questions? Nobody?
I'll show you the ball next week.